If you look at like well-being and wellness, in this stressful kind of modern lifestyle, is it worth the hype? Like, are we doing it right? Or like, how can we get the best out of yoga for our own body and fitness?
It's hard, I think, maybe to speak on behalf of a larger population, but here is just a simple thing to think about. But you're standing and you're getting ready for walking out the door and you drop your keys. What is the position that you take when you drop your keys, right? Most of us just bend over and grab them. Right. This is not exactly the most functional way to do that. Another good example is getting on and off the ground. Right? How we come down to the floor, how we stand up off of the floor. The ways that we do this aren't always functional. And over time, they can lead to injury. Yoga being looked at as like a feminine practice, right? And then the guys are going to be out there and they're going to do weightlifting and they're going to do rugby or cricket or something like that, something that it's considered more traditionally aggressive or masculine. But when we look at higher level athletes, Kobe Bryant used to do dance classes in order to learn like a new shuffle. Or you find, professional weightlifters who are starting to do yoga because they need to develop their flexibility a bit more. And what I love about yoga is that normally it has the attraction. I said that meditation brought me into Buddhism. I mean, that's just something that worked out for me and my own personal characteristic. But yoga has brought so many people into mindfulness. What I think is important is we have to learn to look past the stigmas. We have to look past of thinking like this is feminine or that this is masculine. A big part of mindfulness, a big part of meditation is that there can be a perception that we have to work against our mind, that we have to control it and put it into a certain category, or maybe we think we're a good person or a bad person based on our thoughts. But a mindfulness practice is reminding us more and more to be accepting of who we are or accepting of where we are at a given time. So if it's pure vanity, why you want to start exercising, fine. But be aware of it, acknowledge it, own it, accept it.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Founders Podcast. And this time we have this very special guest of the podcast. He's not only not Sri Lankan, but he's also Rushma's husband and a trainer in yoga and mindfulness. And Michael, you can add, I think you have several accolades to your name. So you can add as we go on. And I decided to add Michael to this podcast because he's going to bring in a very important aspect of wellness into our audience, right? With years of yoga practice, mindfulness training with women, and also understanding what the difference between strength, flexibility, and where we need to focus when it comes to health and well-being. So let's not take more time. Michael, tell us. The most important question I think everyone has on their minds is how did you come to be in our wonderful island? And how did you get connected with Rushma? A bit of gossip there, but everyone's listening.
Well, I think it's always good to start with a little hot gossip, right? We'll generate a little interest. So first, thank you to Sisterhood in Sri Lanka for having me here. I'm grateful, maybe I got the foot in the door thanks to being Rishma's husband, but I am grateful for this opportunity and really happy to be able to have the chance to share with your audience just some of the insights that I've gained over the years. I got to Sri Lanka because my interest in Buddhism and reaching a little bit further back, probably my interest in meditation. I originally started meditating when I was 19 years old. That's 28 years ago. And I was meditating for a little more than a year when I met my teacher of today, who is a Sri Lankan Buddhist monk. He was invited to come and teach at one of our groups. And I was really captivated by his style. It was something new and interesting to me. And his name is Peradiniya Sujatha. Today he goes by Bhante Sujata, and he and I think, had a very natural friendship. Very quickly, we became friends, and he was learning about America. I was learning about Buddhism, and then in turn, I learned about Sri Lanka. I first came with him to Sri Lanka in the year 2000. I came back to live here for a few years in 2006 and 7. And then I came back to live here continuously since 2011. So, kind of by the numbers, I say I'm around 25% Sri Lankan. But what it is that I think kept me here was, of course, the opportunity to do the work. We initiated with a lot of charitable work that we did in Sri Lanka. As Bhante Sujata's popularity expanded in the United States, so did the funds that were coming in for charitable work. And we knew that we needed something on the ground. And in discussing it, Bhante and I wanted to have kind of a foundation or a center here in the island. And I said, I'd be willing to do it, happy to come and live here. And we'd agreed that the best thing to do would be to establish a home base as a meditation center. So now I manage and operate the Sanatha Suwaya Meditation Center in Kandy. And through there, we do our charitable projects, in addition to bringing an opportunity for people to come and practice and stay at our center. So that's what kept me here. And in the process, of course, I met Rishma, I met you. We've all been friends now for 11 years, I think. So it's,
Yeah, what a decade.
and we all still look like we haven't aged a day. So I'm
Yes,
happy for that as well, right? So that's what brought me here.
myself.
Yeah, thanks.
So, um, you got into meditation and yoga through Buddhism, right? But then you come from, I think you forgot to mention, you come from Michigan, and also you were into fitness much before that.
Mm.
So I think you were telling us before also how you got into weight training and your rollerblading and things like that. So coming from a very power lifting, strength based training into yoga, like how did you make that transition and how did it affect your flow and energy and movement?
Yeah, that's a great question. Thanks for framing it like that. Originally, I got into exercise because I was trying to transition my life. During my early and mid teens, I really lacked direction, and it influenced my life in a very negative way. I was really going down a bad path. And after kind of crashing out, I knew that I needed to make changes. And that journey really started with fitness. I knew that I needed to attend to my body because I had been neglecting my health. So I've always been fortunate in that I was naturally kind of a healthy eater, but getting into weight training. And of course, as a young person, a young guy, we want to get big muscles and look strong and feel more attractive. So weightlifting was where I began. And after a few years of weightlifting and weight training, I was adding in other things like running kind of extensively. As you mentioned, rollerblading, that was like one of my passions. Skateboarding, snowboarding, a lot of things that I did. What was a very interesting turning point for me in the exercise model was exercise coach who had recognized that I was putting the majority of my time into rollerblading, and it was very therapeutic for me mentally. And I think I would say I became addicted to it because I was probably doing it 3-4 hours a day. And so in that process, he said to me, it's great that you're doing this as your fitness training, but what if you were to, say, slip and fall off of a bridge? Would you be able to catch and hold yourself? I know that when we watch the movies, we see Tom Cruise holding from like one finger on a helicopter moving. But I mean, realistically, just imagine, think to yourself right now, everybody out there, can you hold yourself up for 15 seconds, 20 seconds? Can you pull yourself up off of a ledge? If it's not even thinking about fitness exactly as a model to perform superhuman strength, but functional strength. And it really opened my ideas to functional health. That led me to volunteering and working with a personal training company in the United States. And that was an amazing experience. I really attribute all of my deepest knowledge and deepest insights to my teacher, Brent Steep, the founder of Advanced Training Techniques. He was integral to getting me to look at health and start understanding it as a more practical approach and how to do things like balancing your cardio, balancing your flexibility, balancing your resistance training and muscular fitness. So those were really influential parts. Yoga became a natural interest for me. As you said, really, I started with meditation. Meditation led to Buddhism, and having an interest in mindfulness practice, mindfulness training techniques. Yoga was a very natural progression because I think a very easy and relatable term to put onto this would to be thinking of yoga as a moving meditation. Many of us are experiencing and witnessing people who are performing absolutely incredible flexibility and strength and training, performing very gymnastic and interesting yoga postures. But this can be possibly a little bit misleading and maybe even a little bit intimidating for people who might want to try and pursue yoga or at least try it. I've had a lot of people come in and say like, I'd love to do yoga, but I'm just not flexible enough. Or, they're very intimidated because we see those things. I remember being a young guy going to the gym and looking at the big, strong men and thinking like, oh, I don't belong here, but we've all got to start somewhere. What also can be misleading about those extremely gymnastic postures is that becomes the pursuit. That becomes the intention. That's the goal. So before somebody starts a yoga journey, they might just think to themselves, I want to look a certain way or I want to be able to perform that. Nothing wrong with having that intention, that motivation, but it can also be very disappointing because sometimes our bodies are just not built for that. Or we might be starting at an age where we're not going to be ready for that. There are people who come from, for example, dance or gymnastics backgrounds that have a flexibility that comes from their childhoods. And I think can be very risky and misleading to make the pursuit of a yoga practice to have a more dynamic or flexible body. If we can look at a pursuit in a yoga practice to create union between mind and body or mind and motion, attention and motion, using the body as an object to develop a sense awareness, our physical position in space. This is really, I think, a good segue into yoga. And it also needs to be mentioned that yoga is a complete science. It has so much teaching to it. I want to avoid kind of getting caught up in terms, but there are many limbs in yoga, and only one of those limbs goes with asanas, the postures. And it can be very natural for people to think that a yoga practice is complete if they've become very adept in postures and physical strength while not addressing the other aspects of the science. So I think the real traditional and advanced teachers would say that, we're just, if we're just doing postures, if we're just going and exercising, that's really what it is. It's just fitness and we're calling it yoga. So it's a little bit of a long answer.
Yeah.
I hope it's clear.
No, it is. It is very interesting because what we are also trying to use this podcast to highlight is for women, at least. This is in our sphere of influence about the importance of exercise, movement, and flexibility for their well-being and wellness, right?
Mm.
And I know yoga is quite like a trending subject right now. Everyone's trying to do yoga. It's very expensive to take a class. But if you to look at like well-being and wellness, in this stressful kind of modern lifestyle, is it worth the hype? Like, are we doing it right? Or like, how can we get the best out of yoga for our own body and fitness?
It's hard, I think, maybe to speak on behalf of a larger population, but here is just a simple thing to think about. But you're standing and you're getting ready for walking out the door and you drop your keys. What is the position that you take when you drop your keys, right? Most of us just bend over and grab them. Right. This is not exactly the most functional way to do that. Another good example is getting on and off the ground, right? How we come down to the floor, how we stand up off of the floor. The ways that we do this aren't always functional. And over time, they can lead to injury, right? So talking about, maybe the value of it or learning to move. I I noticed after some time doing a yoga practice, I remember one day I was just standing there brushing my teeth and I was kind of like hunched over on my hip and I'm just kind of lazily kind of doing it. And then I thought, let me make some changes. I brought myself up. I kind of squared up my hips. I softened my knees. I put myself into a position and I just felt sturdy. And I felt like even thinking about a yoga position, learning to be aware of how we stand, learning to be aware of how we walk, learning to be aware of how we sit down, how we drive a car, how we work at our computer. If you're developing a meditation practice, we're training ourselves to become aware of how our mind is in the present moment. And a meditation practice helps us to learn to be aware of how our body is in a given moment. I think that if we're looking towards, how this affects or how this influences men and women, I think it's in a sense equal because we all have bodies and we all need to protect ourselves. I think perhaps a stronger note of attention should be given to come back to that idea of why we're doing it. You and I, Zara, or the three of us, we had a really nice conversation. We were talking about yoga being looked at as like a feminine practice, right? And then the guys are going to be out there and they're going to do weightlifting and they're going to do rugby or cricket or something like that, something that it's considered more traditionally aggressive or masculine. But when we look at higher level athletes, Kobe Bryant used to do dance classes in order to learn like a new shuffle. Or you find, professional weightlifters who are starting to do yoga because they need to develop their flexibility a bit more. And what I love about yoga is that normally it has the attraction. I said that meditation brought me into Buddhism. I mean, that's just something that worked out for me and my own personal characteristic. But yoga has brought so many people into mindfulness. So people may start because they want to develop flexibility, strength, or they want a yoga booty or something like that. Great. We can work out and we can focus on that. And then maybe over time, the other aspects and avenues develop. What I think is important is we have to learn to look past the stigmas. We have to look past of thinking like this is feminine, or that this is masculine. I mean, we've got female weightlifters, right? These things don't have to belong to one gender. And again, to come back, I think the reason I try to highlight the idea about people who are doing gymnastic postures is because that can be intimidating. We go in and it's like, oh my God, I'll never be able to do that. So we don't start. And I think that that's a big risk when we get caught up in competition. The competition is within. We have to make peace with where we are. And that's another practice that yoga is always reminding us to practice and develop a lot of self-love and acceptance. So I think that would then say the individual is on the right track,
Yeah. You
I-
will just to add on to, sorry, just to add on to what Michael was talking about how yoga earning the rep of being feminine and, men having, being doing the strength training, being the more masculine thing. Interestingly, like research even done by the British Medical Journal suggests that men working with yoga and doing yoga has a strong relationship with reducing depressive symptoms. And for women, going into strength training helps manage the symptoms better. Isn't that interesting? Because we've all conditioned ourselves to believe the other way, but then research
either
tells
this
us,
or that.
yeah,
I just
research
wanted to
is,
highlight the same thing.
and
Yeah.
research is also showing that it was a 2024 study actually.
Yeah.
That's true.
And because we, especially as we age, women, we need strength training to build muscle mass, as because we age after 45.
Bone health.
Bone health, we lose that.
Other thing to add is that especially many women who give birth maybe have cesarean section, depending on the nature of there's different procedures for cesarean section, but it can also be something that strongly affects kind of mid body strength and balance development, hip position, even traditionally, carrying the baby. We tend to carry the baby on one side. Ladies tend to carry a purse maybe on one side. I can speak from my own experience of my
Your
wife who
own
has been
experience of carrying the baby.
not carrying the baby, but carrying the purse. My wife, anytime we leave the house, she makes sure she has everything we own in one bag. And then
The right size.
just today, I lifted up her purse and and it reminds me that, we have habits, right? So just like me brushing my teeth that day, everybody in the audience, try brushing your teeth today with the opposite hand. Right? Try, carrying your purse on the opposite side. If you've got a baby, carry the baby with the other arm, whatever it is. These are things that also help to teach us. And then we're bringing mindfulness into our movement, into our day-to-day life. And that in itself is a part of the practice.
Yeah. I was just thinking how I do it. I always carry on.
I noticed it.
Yeah.
You went.
No, it's scary, Michael. But thank you for those tips. And I just wanted to just touch on some things like you were talking about balancing cardio and flexibility and all these things, right? What we usually tend to do is sometimes if we get into some sort of exercise, we only focus on that. For example, your example of rollerblading, or if somebody was going to the gym, they would mostly do cardio. I think this is very common for women. Also, they get on that treadmill and keep running. And why is it? Do you think, in your experience, it's important to mix up, exercise modes or energy flows? Like, how does that work with mindfulness?
Mm. Well, first, physically, it's hugely important that I think we add variety to our sport, just so we don't kind of overtrain. In terms of the mindfulness aspect, I want to come back to that idea of always ask yourself why you're doing it. And don't be embarrassed by your answers to yourself. You don't have to tell them to anybody. If you're like saying to yourself, just want to have a six-pack so I look good on the beach this year because I'm trying to attract a partner. Fine. Nothing wrong with that. Don't judge yourself, be okay with it. A big part of mindfulness, a big part of meditation is that there can be a perception that we have to work against our mind, that we have to control it and put it into a certain category. Or maybe we think we're a good person or a bad person based on our thoughts. But a mindfulness practice is reminding us more and more to be accepting of who we are or accepting of where we are at a given time. So if it's pure vanity, why you want to start exercising, fine. But be aware of it, acknowledge it, own it, accept it. And then it may change over time. That's fine. It may not. How multi-sport training or different discipline training could work in terms of mindfulness, I think that then would really depend on the application. A lot of people talk about getting in the zone. I think we're all familiar with the idea. I'm in the zone, and sometimes we get in the zone through fitness, through sport, through exercise. I've heard people, and I've said it myself, that when I'm skateboarding or snowboarding or surfing, the whole world falls away. And we're totally connected into that moment. I would be possibly a little reluctant to call that exactly mindfulness, but it at least gives us some insight into what it is to be singularly focused, to really be able to develop a high level of attention, concentration, attention. These are very important foundation stones in a mindfulness practice. So the things that we do to bring ourselves there are nice because they give us that example. But if we were only able to achieve deep concentration and awareness through only surfing, well, then I have to ask, how do you bring it into your life in other ways? So it would be important to kind of maybe have sports or physical activity reveal to us that these things are within our capabilities, but we also have to be careful that we become attached or too attached to that one mode. So like, I can only meditate if I sit on that cushion or if I sit in that location. I can only get to that space in my mind if I eat a chocolate bar first or if I listen to this song first. It's all well and good. We use these things to help us along the way, but true practice will show us over time that these things are not always going to be available. So I think that doing a variety of things is wonderful for us as human beings because we also have such different personalities. personalities. And just so we try this, we try that, find what works for you, and then shake it up a little later.
Yeah.
And
So,
also, oh, sorry. And also, it sounds like Michael touched on something that is very commonplace for women and mothers as well. Basically, you were talking towards the end about if that, then this can
Mm.
happen. So, even that mindfulness starts becoming very important, especially in motherhood as well, because it's like, first, let me do this, then I can do this. For example, with kids, I hear mom saying that, after my children eat, then I can eat, blah, blah, blah. But they're starving, they've been slaving away, they've been going to work, they've been managing the household, but it's always that first that, then, you attend to yourself. How very subtly that comes into your life in many different ways. So, that's such an important aspect to look at. I remember my father had always told my mom, no, you're hungry now, you eat, have your energy, store yourself, and then, the kids will eat when they're hungry. So then she had started to, do that because it's very important and, you feel better about attending to your needs. Yeah.
but just thinking about it, I mean, a lot of people are busy, like as you said, Michael. So, like, we might not have time to like dedicate entire swaths of time, like early morning getting up to
Mm.
do yoga practice, or focusing on this kind of time for your flow.
Mhm.
So, in that sense, like, how do you still manage to bring some sort of yoga into your life?
Yeah. Sorry to interrupt you. I think if I misunderstood the question, then put me back on track. But I think that the easy answer is break the conception in your mind that it has to last for a certain period of time, that you have to prepare so much for it. And I know this from my own personal experience. I have quite a type A personality. I have to have everything in order before I start something. And what I've learned is that leads to huge procrastination. Because as Rishma said, the conditions are never going to be right. If all of these things, now I can start. So first I got to put on my Lululemon pants, and then I've got to, get all dressed up and fit, and I got to make sure I look like this, and now I'm ready to do it. It's like, no, you don't. You can seriously do something for 5 minutes or less. You can do it probably in the clothes you're wearing. It doesn't have to be something that's so extreme that you need to get yourself there. I mean, if we're going to talk about yoga, then I think we have to maybe separate that out, is that there's a process of grounding, there's a process of movement, there's a process of coming out. There is an in and out. There are transitions that we have to do when we're talking about maybe a dedicated yoga practice. That I understand. But if you're just trying to bring a little healthiness to your body, it can be as much as just changing the way you stand. One of my teachers, he said to his students all the time, a fitness coach, he would always say, when you're standing in line at the supermarket, you can make a few small adjustments in your body that people aren't going to notice, that can even create a little bit of stability and balance. Most of us have developed some kind of habit in our day to day. Like I say, how you drive a car, how you sit, how you work on your computer. If you just bring your attention back and say, okay, I'm going to devote 5 minutes to this, focus, this posture. There's very simple postures that are out there that can create a little bit of strenuousness and then get us in there. I mean, I understand maybe we don't want to break a sweat here and there. That makes sense. But I'm trying to bring to my mind maybe something functional. Oh yeah, I read a study once. It said, and I'll ask the two of you, what the study concluded was how frequently someone working at a desk should stand up and walk around for a few minutes, maybe do a little basic stretching and then come back to their desk. How frequently do you think somebody should do that according to their findings, if you're just sitting and working at a desk?
Top of every hour.
Every 30 minutes?
Yeah, Zara's close. Every 20 minutes.
Mm.
Who gets up every 20 minutes while they're working at their desk? Nobody. You're
Yeah.
sitting there, you're focused. And think about it. If you set these alarms on your phone to go off every 20 minutes, so then 20 minutes goes off, you stand up, maybe you do a little marching, maybe you just do a little stretching, loosen yourself up. It's not practical, right?
Yeah.
But if we did something like every couple hours, every hour or two, I mean, if you can do it more, it's great. I think that my real answer to your question is take away the misconceptions that all the conditions have to be correct. I was talking to my cousin now. He's just turning 50, and he's a restaurant manager. And I saw him this past year and I was like, "Yeah, you look really good." I'm like, what's the difference?" And he is like, "Well, I'm drinking less and I'm trying to get in some exercise." And I know he works a lot. He probably works 60 hours a week. So I'm like, "What do you do?" He goes, "I go into the cooler and I do push-ups." So he's just back there doing push-ups. I mean, it might sound silly, but you don't have to do push-ups either, but there are things that you can do, small postures. Maybe another time we can get into we maybe do a session together and I can show everybody some basic stuff that we could do to take into your
Yeah,
daily life.
Oh,
Two,
would
three
love that.
minutes.
love that bonus video. Yeah.
Yes.
So
And go ahead, Sarah.
just to like bring Michael back to like what we also do at the Sisterhood. We also focus a lot on women with hormonal issues and PCOS and things like that, right? And I think Rushma can add here. Not every day is like a good day. Sometimes your body doesn't let you get up and be all like perky and ready to go, right?
Mm.
On that front, like how would they then kind of is there something called a relaxing flow or like something that will motivate you for people like that?
Well, I can't speak as somebody who has PCOS, but I live with somebody who has PCOS. And maybe what I might start with is speaking to the ladies and the spouses of those who carry the syndrome. It is, of course, something that is quite silent and so many ways. When we look at a person, we can't understand their minds. And in the same way, we can't understand maybe the pain or whatever it is that they may carry. I know that Rushma over the years has tried to put a lot of courage, and she's pushed herself through a lot of pain in order to kind of work through her day-to-day life, just to put on a good face that day or just to get out there. Can't say that there's going to be maybe one specific vinyasa, one specific set of movements that's going to work with PCOS, because I've seen it affect my wife in so many different ways. Some days she's having extreme sensitivity in her skin, and like I might just nudge her or give her a little push or something like that, and it physically hurts her. And it's for a long time, it was kind of unbelievable to me. I'm like, "What? How did that hurt?" And literally she's feeling pain. And it took me a good deal of time to understand it. So I think first you have to honor where you're at. And if it's a day where you just can't do it, then don't do it. Pain is going to happen. Pain is a symptom of the body. Discomfort and all of those things are there. But suffering is optional, right? You don't have to make yourself suffer through it. You've got to find, I think this is where now fitness doesn't necessarily mean getting up and starting to do jumping jacks. Fitness is like knowing when you need to take a bath. Fitness is knowing when you need to have downtime. Fitness is knowing that you need to wait a day for the lactic acid to get out of your muscles, and so that you can then be strong and ready to go on another day. So maybe it's less about fighting and pushing yourself through, but really becoming deeply in touch with what's going on. And then I think also there's pressure, right? On everybody. We all want to like look good. We want to present ourselves well. We want to stay as youthful and young and interesting as we possibly can to other people, to our spouse, to our partners. And so it's going to be important for the partners of those who are carrying PCOS to recognize that, these people are having bad days, giving them
Yeah.
a break. And then for like in Brushma's case, for example, she might be having a day where she's not feeling her best and it's affecting her self-esteem. And then she might be concerned about how she's presenting to me. I think really this is more of a mental and a psychological kind of aspect where I guess if it's men with women or if it's like women with women as partners, whatever, it's a female relationship, something like that, just understanding that your partner is going through something that is very difficult to see and that being able to communicate and have the confidence and trust in each other to about like, hey, this is where I'm at. Like, yeah, because I can definitely say that in our relationship, it took time before I really understood. And actually, Rushma was going through those things for quite a while before she was diagnosed. So even she didn't know what's going on. And then I think, Rushma, you told me once that something like this is like 60% of women are undiagnosed with this or something like that.
A large percentage are undiagnosed. I can't remember the stat now.
I I know you guys for a long time, so I know, you come from a very fitness background. When you and Ushma, got together first, you were both doing yoga floors, running around, hiking and stuff, right? So, but over the years, like nothing you have seen, even Rushma has struggled with this also, she has put on more weight and, it gets to her, I know as a friend sometimes, seeing her body kind of change because even from like earlier days, she was a fitness freak and at one point. So like, not being able to like achieve that, this is something you two enjoy doing together, but now it's changing because of her body. How do you all deal with it? How do you like
That's
as
a
very
good
fit people,
question.
because like weight gain in PCOS is a big concern for women. It is a concern for all women, but then especially when you can't control it, right? Because of the hormone imbalances, right? Like how do you all as how do you, Rushma, deal with it, and how do you guys as spouses deal with it
And
as a couple?
actually, that's a really, really good question, Sarah. First of all, it's tough because it's an image change and identity change also from, doing dancing, athletics, enjoying going to the gym. And it wasn't like I'm a fitness freak or I'm a gym freak or anything. It's just you liked it. You went and did it. And then suddenly over time, you started noticing, this hurts. And then that hurts. And then, there's pain. And then suddenly, you don't understand your own hormone cycle because we take it for granted. Like you're born as a woman having the cycle. It's just like, it comes every month, not paying attention to it. And then over time, so like Michael said, more than even self-esteem, it's just confidence and like, well, I suppose self-esteem you could say, but like faith in yourself of like, okay, what has happened to you? You've turned into a lump. My weight gain is actually 17 kgs, right? And that's a lot of weight to put on. And since I got diagnosed with also some of the symptoms we thought were only PCOS, then you discover, hey, guess what? You also have endometriosis. And that was like, now I know what it is. So how it affected us as a couple is, yeah, we couldn't do certain things together. And I'm sure it was very frustrating to him because and irritating because it's like, you could do it yesterday. Like, why is it a big deal now? And then, your mind switches off. You also, I got into a very like demotivated slump where I wouldn't, it was both also the medication I was taking was making me depressed. So I had to tell the doctor, I'm not taking this in. I'm not doing this. So I got out of that and I had a lot of reaction. And so it's like, I have work. Now I have to put extra effort to get out of this. I have to put extra effort to get my spouse to understand what's going on rather than you get to a point where like, okay, why do I have to explain it to you? Can you just accept it, and you get to a point where you're just like, okay, if I'm gonna do this, there's gonna be some comment or some statement that's gonna bother me, so I rather avoid it. Right. So it took us a while to communicate and figure things out. And now that we know what we are working with, and first of all, it's also for me to accept that I have a lot of bad days. And some days Michael is right. It's just like, no, okay, let's just do it. Let's just try. And then sometimes when I can't, like you can, earlier this week, it was just one pot. Okay. There were like a few things that I had washed up. So just one pot. I'm like, okay, my wrist really hurts very, very bad, both my wrists. I've just left the one pot for you to wash and I'm going to rest. So we have days like that. And then before it might have
Cooking pot.
a cooking pot. Thank you. There are days like that. Previously it would have been looked at like a very, a cop out or a lazy thing to do. Like, why don't you complete what you started? But now it's more of like, okay, I get it. This is why. And I also don't have the fear of like, I don't want to be perceived as lazy. Then you reach a point where like, it's fine. Think I'm lazy. I just can't do it, you know? So we're figuring that out still.
From my side, I think what I would say is the biggest shift for me was really understanding that Rushma's been diagnosed. And now I don't know if it's just my character or if whatever it is, but then when it had a name, when it had this identification, that shifted that in me to be like, okay, now I can see this isn't a psychological thing. This is something that she didn't choose. This is something that she is having to manage. And so learning to recognize that in myself made a shift. And I could see it started to encourage me to be different and then to find ways to practice acceptance and then focus on being in the relationship. I mean, at the end of the day, you love the person. You don't love just their body, right? And I mean, something could happen, in a sense of like a marriage, right? One of us could be hit by a car. One of us could lose an arm. One of us, I mean, it sounds morose, I know, and I don't mean to be extreme, but in that sense, well, maybe I do mean to be extreme to remind us that things can happen. When you take on being in a relationship with a person, we fall in love typically at younger ages, right? Where things are all functioning and working well, and we don't see that far in the future. But it's the wisdom of generations and time to recognize things can change. So when I can say from that personal experience that when Rushma would make, a choice not to exercise or not to do something in a certain day, I was perceiving it as a personality thing, like laziness. She used the word lazy a few times. So that's that's how I was perceiving. I'm like, don't be lazy. Come on, let's go. Let's get up. Let's move. I mean, sometimes in a condescending way, sometimes in a playful way, whatever it might be. But the idea that, this was still thinking of it as a choice because we've got to take care of our health for our future. Now I've come to see that it's she's working through it and she's doing her best because she has a strong personality, and so she is being courageous and she's finding ways to get it in when she can, and in her own way. And this is good for us and all people to recognize, like I'm saying, when we go through these practices, to recognize we're all coming from a different background. We're all coming from a different, we don't know what the person for yoga context, the person on the mat next to you, you don't know their life. You don't know where they're coming from, what's going on. You could look at somebody who's maybe very large in body, maybe very heavy, and then they're doing the splits and you've got like a skinny little person next to him who can't. So it's like, again, we cannot judge from the outside. So as a couple, I think, practicing tremendous acceptance, keeping in mind why you two are together, why you two love each other versus, what's going on, and being genuinely interested and understanding about what somebody goes through. Then when I think Rishma says we're still figuring out, we're all the time, she and I keep saying to each other, well, let's try this week. Let's try this week. Let's, do this when we walk the dogs. Let's do this when we go out. Let's try something. We're both taking the things that we love and that we want to do, and then trying to find ways to reconcile them with the things we can do. I think that's it.
Zara, I just want to add on to your question based on like what Michael said. For anyone who is experiencing the chaos that endometriosis and PCOS can just show up in your life suddenly, doing it at your own pace and figuring it out is very, very important, because sometimes it's just making that extra trip to a gym or a class or even just having to lift something feels very heavy, and it took a while. And like right now I figured like, oh, I just need to get back to dancing. It took me a while to figure that, the dancing part. And it's more enjoyable. It's just like switch on some music, you're just there, and it's not even about so the days that I didn't feel good, I was like, it's okay, let me just dance for 2 minutes to the song that I like. So I got some movement in, and I'm training my brain that there's something that I'm doing. And then slowly I do 2 minutes on that day. The better day I might do 10 minutes or 15 or 30 minutes. Right?
Yeah.
And then you create consistency, and that will help. So when you're going through pain, sometimes it's very hard to maintain consistency, and you do make bad choices. Like I made bad food choices, which also contributed to the weight gain. It's not only the hormone issue, but I had made some bad food choices, and that contributed to the weight gain. And then you're stuck with like, why did I do this? Because now to shed all of this, it's going to be even harder because that's the problem with the disorder.
Yes, it's like a vicious cycle, right?
Yeah,
And if
that's the
I can
problem with
intervene, it and add to it, depression, stress eating, things like that. The way that we manage depression, some people might turn to drugs, alcohol, food, television, sleep,
know that you are going to go through that process. Just try to get some help, talk to somebody, go through the process. And it's not the end of the world that we made the bad choice. But, being mindful that, okay, I did make it. Now I'm going to just, add healthier things into my life. And that's what I've been trying. And it works out when you're mentally more like, oh, just fucking do this.
Yeah,
Right?
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And as a spouse, also as Michael, coming from fitness, also like what he said about supporting your wife, because it's only a woman can go through this, to like on those bad days, I guess, kind of give a pass, kind of help. And just finally, like wrapping up, Michael, as you age, thinking back when you first started exercise and just, to focus your mind, get some direction in your life at 18 to now almost 50. How do you how do you view exercise? Like how do you think how it helps you in your life? Like do you still go to that same feeling? Like is it that still that you at that point you said it helped you find some direction in life, but today how does it help you?
It's helping me to sustain and prolong my life. And it's to live in as much as possible pain free. Yeah, I'm sometimes maybe a little superstitious or reluctant to say it, but like I really don't experience much pain. I'm a little bit clumsy, so I tend to run into things. I'm kind of covered in bruises or stitches quite frequently, but for the most part, at 47 years old, I feel cardiovascularly fit, feel like I have a functional amount of strength in my body. I have a healthy amount of flexibility. I feel I don't really carry pain at this point. That doesn't mean it's not coming. It's inevitable. One day I'm going to be in pain for sure. But even my mother now, she's 83 years old, and we have several flights of stairs in our house, and my mom's plucking up and down them every day and moving around. And I guess what I see fitness is now, especially when like this idea about functional fitness, as adults, we lose a sense of play. Like I love that Rushma's doing dancing now because I can see how it is something that she finds joy in, and it makes her feel good. It makes her feel confident and happy. And that to me is a big part of this functional fitness, about bringing this into your day to day. And so when I'm looking at myself and I'm thinking like, okay, I'm 47, but I still feel great. That is what keeps me going. That makes me want to do more. That is what it is. So I'm glad that I, created it as a habit in my life at a younger age. And now it's just something that I seek to maintain. I still, I see things and I'm like, oh, I want to see if I can make my body do that. Find out if I can make my body do this. It's never too late to start. It's another thing that Rushma mentioned, weight. People tend to think that maybe they're too far gone, right? "Oh, I'm too far gone. I'm too old. I'm too rickety. I'm too sick." But it's truly, our body is continually seeking to heal itself. Like if you find any nick, bruise, or cut on your body, you'll see in a few days your body's healing itself. And it's the same way if you add in some type of fitness to your life, it's only going to promote that process. It's only going to, your brain, your body continually working to mend and repair. So that's how you get into your 70s and your 80s, with the blessings of good luck and fortune and things like that, that you can still, bend and move and pick stuff up and get around. And really, what I like to say is play. Approaching it with a playful sense, approaching it with this joyful sense, and enjoying movement, not looking at it as a punishment. I'm exercising because I have to, or this and that. I mean, it can feel like that on days, of course. We're all humans. But when it's like something you enjoy. So sports, finding the sport, or just dancing around your house, that's enough to feel good. And remembering, like I say, about the weight and the numbers. I mean, muscle is something like basically like a kilo. I forget the numbers right now, but a pound of muscle in terms of size versus a pound of adipose tissue is completely different. All right. And so we might be building muscle, building strength, and for some reason the number on the scale is going higher, but the waist size is getting smaller. What's going on? Don't focus on the numbers. Focus on how you feel. Focus on how you feel that day, maybe how you feel about how you look. And I think those are the things that inspire.
That's a great way to wrap things up. And I love how it's not final. There's no, there's always a way to get back. Rishma, you want to add something?
No, I think that's just a great note to end on, right? It's not final. Find something playful and try to get into the practice of mindful acceptance of how we're changing, because we're always changing our bodies.
Thank you. Thanks, guys.
Thank you,
Zara,
everybody.
it was wonderful.
Thank you, Zara.
questions.
Wonderful job, and take good care of yourselves, everyone. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Rishma.
Zara here.
Again. So if you like what you watch on this channel, please follow us for more, because we are going to be bringing you a lot of stories from women in Sri Lanka who can inspire you, empower you and motivate you. So to support us, please do
Subscribe, like and comment on our channel.
Thank you.
Thank you.